Welcome back, Flyers Nitty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv Wolok, my partner in crime as always, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, brother?
Doing good, Yariv. Almost near the weekend here for the Flyers. Not the greatest. 0-5, 5-game losing streak here in the last 5 games. 0-5 on the homestand so far. So, in terms of the play on the ice right now, not the greatest, but there are some interesting topics surrounding the team to discuss. So we'll delve into that stuff.
It does. I hate watching the team lose every time, but if they are going to lose, it's like I do look at the standings and watching us drop, and I'm like, okay,
This is
we're
the
in like the
perfect
home.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're like Danny knew what he was doing here by removing the players when he did. It was the right move, and at least we have
Well,
we have the draft to get excited about. And we're going to talk a lot more about the draft as we approach the end of the season. Um,
definitely. And I think most people could probably
yeah,
agree that at least for Briere and what he did at the deadline, even if he wasn't removing those players that he did remove and he kept them on this roster, the chance of them competing for a playoff spot anyway was slim. So why not take advantage? And then potentially with your team, losing more games due to the talent you subtracted, you might better position yourself in the draft, right? So it could be beneficial on a lot of fronts, actually.
yeah. No, it was a shrewd move that needed to happen. Yeah, but we have some good topics for today, and all kind of themed around the Flyers. I guess losing, but talk about the bright spots within that. So before we get started, just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications so you get notified when we release these episodes. Today we have to release it right before a Flyers game because just the schedule was weird for us both this week. So it's what it ended up being. That's why the notification bell helps. And also for the audio version, go to the Spotify and iTunes and hit the follow and give us a rating if you can as well. These are the best ways to support our show. For those who have done that, thank you all so much. And those who have not, please do so now. We'd really appreciate it. Also, shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. It's not freezing anymore, at least in Philly. So it's a good time to wait in line at Jim's. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's Steaks. Also, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for your insurance adjustment needs. They will help facilitate the process between you and your insurance company and make sure you get the best claim possible and deal with all of the headaches that come with dealing with insurance companies. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also just want to give a brief shout out to our partner, SportsSpider.com. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date as possible on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, just hit the link in the description. Check out SportsSpider.com. Again, the link is in the description. Okay, so we mentioned it already. Flyers lose 5 in a row. They've dropped in the standings. Right now, they are essentially tied with the Penguins with a game in hand for the seventh pick in the draft. Um, if Pittsburgh wins again and the Flyers lose tonight, which there's a good chance they will because they're playing Tampa Bay, who's a much better team, and they are reeling right now, but you never know. The Flyers will drop to sixth. So while the Flyers have lost 5 in a row in somewhat ugly fashion, not that they've played horribly, but just the lack of offense. They have had some clunkers within there, and then they actually were playing well prior to the trade deadline, and then everything kind of just fell off the rails. Understandably so. We talked about it last episode, post the trade deadline, that there is a human element to this. They're probably a little bit demoralized as well. Tortorella talked about in his press conference how he feels for the team, feels for the organization. He wants to win. Still says they're focused on winning, but clearly the organization has made a decision that, losing is not so bad right now. Mentally, you have to manage the players, but the losing is probably what's best in the long term. In the short term, it's a lot of pain and suffering. But I will say this, like, I don't think the Flyers are going to be going into next season again here at the trade deadline expecting to be like, oh, I hope we kind of crumble and go on a 5-10 game losing streak or whatever it is. And that we end up at the bottom of the standing. So this is really the time to do it. So this losing period is kind of feels like poetic in a way. The Flyers took Michkov at number 7 overall. And we're hovering around that space. Now, this year, probably sixth is the best place to end up.
Or
With
above, obviously.
Yeah, or above. But there's still the lottery draft beyond that. So the Flyers are struggling. It's been tough to watch. There are some highlights. We'll talk about some topics. And then, going into tonight's game, Rasmus Ristolainen is also out. So maybe another loss. He's banged up, as Torts likes to say. No diagnosis been given on his injury. What are your thoughts, Vasily?
Yeah, it's obviously been tough since, the trade deadline with them losing the five in a row and just what's happened with subtracting some of the
Yeah.
players that they did subtract. I would say just in terms of who they did subtract, obviously big pieces in terms of the locker room, like a Scott Lawton, Eric Johnson as well, right? Big piece of the culture, even though they were only there or he was only really with the team in a short amount of time. I would say, guys that have a substantial impact on the locker room. So when you remove that and that impact they have, it's going to demoralize some of the team, which I think kind of has translated to their play on the ice. I would say though the last few games the structure's been a little bit better.
Hmm.
But then there's been, goaltending that's kind of come up a little bit as an issue once again. Just not even to single out Urson or Fedotov, both of them have had, a couple sequences in the past few games where they just haven't looked great, right? And when you couple a team that's demoralized on the ice, is having trouble scoring goals, then you add in the goaltending struggles. This is kind of what you see and what you get, right? So we're just seeing a team that's struggling in a lot of different aspects at this point, and uh, it's tough to watch. But like you said, Yariv, right? In terms of where they are as an organization, if you're gonna lose and better your draft position based on where you were this season, now's the time to do so. If they were, to let's say go on a run here these last 20 games or so, and it was the opposite, that would kind of be something that isn't really beneficial for this team just based on where they're at, right? Because it's not like
Yeah.
they would have found themselves in a playoff spot. They would have been in that murky middle. So just looking at like what the team needs going ahead, obviously, which is the center position, getting into those higher draft positions is going to be really helpful to them. I do think though, like with this losing five in a row, there's a couple players that, I think we should still point out and say, hey, despite the losses, there's still some positives, right? Like a Jamie Drysdale has looked really good over this losing streak. We kind of see more confidence coming out of him and his ability to jump up into play, make quick decisions with the puck in the offensive zone, and also just bring the puck to the net. I think, in certain cases earlier this season, he was a little hesitant shooting. And I think now we're kind of seeing that more with goals in back-to-back games, obviously. Another two guys that have, continued to play well are obviously Cates and Forrester. I think they've been pretty good and they've been noticeable to me. Matvey Michkov as well, and Sean Couturier. So there's a handful of guys still, playing decently over this 5 game streak, but it's not really enough to, finish it off and kind of get them back in the winning column. I think the big thing for them really that's hurting them is Konechny's been in a slump. And we know that when your best player isn't performing on a team like this that's struggling, it can be tough to score goals and tough to, get wins on the board. I do know coming up for tonight's matchup, they have Konechny up with Cates and Forster. They kind of switched up that line and moved Brink down. So it should be interesting to see if those two can get him sparked. I think that's the main thing for the Flyers the last stretch here is try to get Konechny feeling good about his game because he's clearly struggling.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about Drysdale first, and then we'll go into TK, and then we'll loop back around to York. And we'll talk about the comments that were made public by Pronger. So you brought up Jamie Drysdale. He has looked more like the player that he kind of showed when he got here, even though he was injured. His offensive game is definitely sparked on. A couple goals is really good. He's very confidence driven. Again, he's a young guy. Um, I think we're probably watching him get out of that. murky middle where he was in, where he was kind of a newcomer dealing with an injury, coming in, learning how to play under Tortorella. And this is kind of what we were hoping for. I don't think that this is just going to be like a short little thing. And I'm excited to see on what he builds on here at the last run going into next season, because he is a very crucial player for this team to rely on, especially offensively. If they are going to fix the power play eventually, he needs to be a big part of that. And it makes me think, like, especially with Risto out now, he's probably going to run the top power play unit, as well as that. I think he should be, not Risto to begin with. So I think maybe it's coming right in time. I think Sealer definitely helps him playing with Sealer, who's been pretty much the same all year, going back to last season as well. So I do think Jamie's, I guess, resurgence here is really important. It's been the maybe the largest bright spot over this 5 game losing streak, is that at least Jamie Drysdale is kind of coming out of it. And I like what you said there. To TK struggles, man, he looks like he's fighting it a little bit for sure.
There could be some injuries at play, perhaps we don't really know,
Yeah,
but
yeah, we brought that up. That's like suspected. It's probably not, they're not injuries enough to make him miss time, but probably enough just to slow him down. I do like, putting him with Cates and Forrester and see what that develops. The other thing I thought of, and I was thinking about this kind of on my drive earlier, is like, why not? He's struggling so much to score right now. Not that he's playing terribly, but he's not producing at the same clip. He didn't like playing the left side, and I can understand why they hesitate. But like that the Michkov Couturier TK line did look good in its short stint. Like, what's the harm in trying TK on the left side again? And maybe moving a guy like Tippett, who is pretty much a pure speed player, and maybe you put him with Paling for now, Paling and Peltier, and just allow them to kind of race up the ice and see if, Tippett can kind of produce on his own. He's kind of that type of player who just kind of shoots from everywhere anyway. So I was thinking about, like, why not try TK again on the left side? Obviously, we'll see tonight how this goes. The Flyers will probably roll with that a little bit. And I haven't been obsessed with keeping the Cates line together, because I'm kind of like, if your best player is struggling, he's important to get going. Obviously, Tortorella agrees with that. So I am
yeah,
interested
I
to
think
see if
it's
that works
smart.
out. But go ahead, go ahead,
I
please.
agree. No, I think it's smart that they put, Konechny there with Forster and Case, just because that duo's been doing well, as we've
Yeah.
kind of stated. So why not see if they can pull him out of the funk, right? So I mean, I think it's worth a shot for the Flyers' perspective. And then if it doesn't work, I wouldn't mind, like you said, Yariv, why not try him back with Couturier and Michkov? Because I think ultimately, if you could have Konechny and Michkov playing together, that's probably the best case scenario for you if you're the Flyers, right? Those are your two most talented
Right.
players. If you can get them on the same page and creating offense, and they're aligned in terms of the style they want to play, I think that's going to be the most beneficial thing for the Flyers going forward. Why not try it out to end this season? See if you can get some sort of chemistry working with connecting on the left side. And then next season, you can maybe start out with that combination if they can figure something out, right?
Yeah, either look, the top nine is kind of depleted. I mean, Paling playing
Definitely.
third
Yeah.
line center is not ideal. Um, Peltier is not necessarily ready for that kind of role on this team quite yet. Maybe he will be. Right now, they have Lixell playing, third line, and he's okay at the NHL level, great at the AHL level, but he hasn't proven too much at the NHL level. So it's a depleted top nine. You can tell they're just trying to figure it out, just something to get by, something to spark the offense right now, because it just hasn't been there. And TK is a big part of that. So that's why I was like, maybe put him with Michkov. The Couturier, Tippett, Michkov line has looked good, but they've also kind of slowed down on the scoring a little bit over the past few games. you know, it would be ideal to at least get TK going a little bit, and maybe it'll speed up Mitchkov's um, development too, because Tippett is not primarily a playmaker, where TK is really good at scoring and
Yeah, he'll
playmaking,
he'll facilitate a little bit
right?
more than Tippett will, right? Like Tippett's not the guy that's going to be pass first, whereas I wouldn't say Konechny's necessarily pass first. He's probably still more of a shoot first guy, but he's gonna look for that pass more often than Tippett is, right?
Yeah.
And I think at this point for Michkov, just the way that he's been playing, we're seeing him becoming more of a shoot first player as well. I think that to begin the season, he was a little hesitant as a rookie to, maybe always take that shot. So he would defer to some of his teammates. But I think we're seeing him develop more of a shoot first
Yeah.
mentality. So if you get him playing with players that do tend to pass a little more, maybe you can get him scoring more goals too. So
Yeah, and that's always the weird thing with Tippett is I feel like Tippett needs like a pure playmaker
definitely,
with him,
yes.
which is why I liked him and Frost together because Frost is definitely more of just like a playmaker type. And right now we don't have any on the team outside of Bobby Brink, so it is a little weird of a position that this team kind of finds itself in. But we'll see what they do. Maybe they try Forrester and Cates with Peltier or something, or mix stuff up. We're gonna probably see different combinations here at the end,
Certainly, yeah.
and we're gonna go through some of that on the second half of the show about young guys who we might see in the mix as we get there. Let's talk about this York Torts drama, and it was kind of sparked up by Pronger's comments publicly. I'll let Vasili read out the quote itself, but it was Pronger essentially calling out Tortorella for not communicating well enough with York. York also probably not. I heard this in the past, right? He doesn't really respond to Tortorella's benchings. I don't know if he really needed to bench York, but while people might complain and say it didn't work, I think it did work actually from what I've seen. And I don't think that York is 100% either, which is why I think he's had some struggles. I think
Yeah,
he's
that
still,
shoulder problem, right?
yeah, I think he's still dealing with some injuries too. And I still think he's a huge part of this future. I don't think, I think I'll let you read the quote, but I'll and react to it, and then I'm going to react to that too. But I think that there's still a very bright future for Cam York. So if you want to go through the quote and your
Yeah, of
thoughts.
course. I think just to preface, right? Like obviously York gets scratched by Tortorella for Andre over the weekend. I would say just in terms of York's play, it's not like he was blowing, anything out of the water or was on fire beforehand. So I could understand, maybe why there was a scratch. If you look at it from Tortorella's perspective, and I think we want to give all perspectives here, in the past, right, when he sent York down and gave some sort of a punishment for bad play, he saw him respond quite well to it, right? So he probably is thinking maybe this is the type of player where I need to give some, punishment to if I think that maybe he's not playing well, and that punishment is taking away ice time, obviously, and hoping that he reacts in the same positive manner that he did when he got sent down to Lehigh a couple seasons ago, right? He comes back and looks really, really great. So really it's sparked by this. So Charlie O'Connor of PHLY tweets his article out for people to read, stating Cam York was scratched on Saturday by John Tortorella, and York spoke on the decision today after practice. He didn't agree with it, and he said he hasn't had much communication with John Tortorella on it. York was quoted, "If there was communication, then maybe I would understand," York said. Um, in the comments to Charlie's article, former Flyers defenseman Chris Pronger, former Stanley Cup winner, I don't know if he's in the Hall of Fame yet, but if he isn't, he will be in the Hall of Fame. But
Sure.
anyways, he basically responded and stated, he did this with Couturier last year. What is the reasoning? Have the media gotten an answer? If the player is not playing up to par, then explain exactly in capitals, Pronger stated, what he needs to fix to be more effective, not use he needs to be better. That is a cop out. Afterwards, Charlie responds to Pronger and states, with Couturier last year, he was asked multiple times by the media for the reasonings and he wouldn't give details. He was more open today about his reasoning behind the York scratch. Pronger then states, not so much worried about the him being open with the media, more so with the player, so they can try and make the necessary changes. When the player comes out and says they don't know and haven't been communicated to, that is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think look, I don't think it's a good thing. But I do think to some degree this will get blown out of proportion. And I think we as fans slash media slash bloggers slash like everybody in the Twitter sphere for sure, we tend to blow things out of proportion if we see tension. Because I think Pronger is right. It does need to be communicated with him.
Definitely.
And I think a lot of people are, it's especially when a team is losing, it's all that like you start talking about like, is Tortorella the right coach? And, a lot of people already want to see Tortorella gone and all that stuff. But I will say, I rarely see an organization respond to this stuff the way that we do as fans from the outside. And I'll give you an example of something. Mitch Marner, in particular, with Toronto, like that he has been under scrutiny in Toronto for I don't even know how many years. The fans are very harsh on him. The media talks about him nonstop. And now his contract's about to come to an end, and I almost guarantee you that that organization is only thinking, how do we get Mitch re-signed? Like they are not thinking let him walk. They were not thinking to they maybe would have traded him for Rantanen because they had some security and they get an equal value player in return, but they are not trying to walk away from a high-end talent. And I think the same thing in this case with Tortorella is I don't think the Flyers are desperately looking to get rid of Tortorella. Like I think that they would look at this as being like, okay, this is a manageable issue. Torts, you need to communicate better with the players. One comment is said, and then things move forward. I don't see this as being the end. Having said that, I don't think that Tortorella will be here like much longer. I think realistically, he's probably just going to finish out his contract and then probably move into the organization and try to find another coach, maybe another year. But I think this will probably get blamed or blown out of proportion. But I think Pronger is also right. And this is the second public instance we've had of this. So for Tortorella talking about how good he is at communication, when he fails to do that, he needs to be called out on it publicly.
Yeah, I totally agree, right? I think if you're a player and you're being benched, even if you're playing terribly and you realize that you're probably playing terribly, the coach deserves, or the coach should be giving you some sort of explanation because as the player, you deserve to know why you're getting sat or losing that ice time or getting benched. My thought process is if you're not aware of what you're potentially doing wrong, then how are you going to be able to fix that, right? But maybe Tortorella sees it in a different way. So let's analyze it from his thought of view, right? And his point of view. Maybe he's pointed out what Cam York's done wrong several times. He has not responded to that, and thus he benched him, right? And then after the benching, did not tell him because he already pointed it out to him beforehand. Not the greatest way to communicate. You should be going to the player, even if you did tell him beforehand that he was missing a coverage or doing something wrong or not closing out a play the way you liked or not being as, aggressive enough with a puck in a certain area. He should have, went to him and said, hey, I called you out on this. You didn't fix it. Hence you're getting benched. Maybe he thought, he already did it in a manner where York would realize why, but obviously not the case, right? So I think there could be improvement from maybe on York's side of things and Tortorella's side of things. I think if you're Danny Briere, though, and you're the general manager in the situation, and you've seen it happen twice in 2 years now, firstly with your captain Sean Couturier, secondly with Cam York, you as the GM probably need to go to John Tortorella and say, hey, these are two players where they feel like, or it looks like in the media that they have not been communicated to. You yourself as a coach state that you're always transparent with your players. What's happening here? Was there a miscommunication? Is there a better way for you to communicate these punitive, punishments when you kind of hand them out to players so something like this doesn't get miscommunicated to the media, right? So I think that's where the GM comes in and needs to be involved, right? I think
Yeah.
this can't just be John Tortorella and Cam York at this point now because it's two times this is happening. The GM, in my opinion, needs to get involved and say, okay, what's happening here so we can make this a better process in the future for not Cam York, but just whoever this happens to next, right? Like the next guy this happens to, because it's John Tortorella, we know he's going to scratch somebody next season if he's still around, or maybe even this season, who knows, right? But whoever this happens to next deserves an explanation. I think Pronger, just his perspective in it, being a guy who used to be a player for the Flyers and just used to be a player in the NHL in general, Pronger seems like a straight shooter and a guy that would probably tell you something straight up. So
Yeah.
he's probably looking at it saying, hey, I used to play with Sean Couturier a while back when I was on the Flyers back in 2012. He was a rookie then. Why isn't Couturier now as the captain getting that level of respect from his coach? So he probably sees that last season and is taken aback by it, then sees it happen again here with the same exact coach and is like, okay, what's going on, right? Let me comment on this. And I'm sure Pronger like has his own opinions of Tortorella. Maybe he's heard things, who knows? And maybe that's kind of also giving a
Sure.
little bit
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
bias in this situation, right?
Yeah, and remember, like the situation with Tortorella and Couturier is not like completely toxic now, right? Like
No, exactly.
he
They've
is
mended the fences, it seems. So
right. So that's why, and it's also up to Tortorella. Like they're gonna have these exit interviews. He needs to state, like he did to Sanheim, exactly what he needs from them, and let them kind of take the off season because they're going to have a long off season. And, maybe York will go play for Team USA and IAHF or something like that, right? There's actually a pretty good chance of that. But, he needs to communicate how do we avoid this in the future, right? Because York is the second highest played player on the team. So you would think if you're going to bench a guy who you rely on heavily, you need to communicate with him well. So I think normally Tortorella does communicate well, but just like a lot of people, like he gets stubborn, he gets in his way. Sometimes I
Yeah.
think this is one of those examples.
And we also just don't know the situation. Like I said, like maybe he called him out on certain things the day before, and then he goes in the
Right.
game situation and fucks up. And then he's like, well, I just told you about this the other day. Like now you're getting benched. I don't need to tell you anything else. Like
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
he's expecting the player to realize that himself. I think there's a little bit of onus on both, right? Like if you're the player, you should be taking accountability for mistakes you're making. That should be on you. You're getting paid millions of
Well,
dollars to play in the NHL. But if you're the coach, you do have to be explicit at a certain point, right? Like maybe if you did call him out beforehand and then you bench him, you got to do it in a better way, right? So like the player at least knows what's happening here.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think, see, it's hard to like call out York for like he hasn't been terrible or something. He just hasn't been as good as last year where he was
Yeah.
very good. So it's kind of like one of those things where it's one of those the only triggers that he can pull with a guy to be like, well, I'm not removing you from the team, but I can sit
Yeah.
you a game. And I think a lot of us freak out over a game, but I hope York was upset about it. You almost like hope like again, this is that whole conflict that Tortorella tries to spark within players, where he's like, "Well, prove me wrong for benching you,
Yeah. Fair.
like, like
I
shove it in my
guess
face."
I guess to caveat that though, like it could be a good tactic, but you just have to hope that he's not pushing the button too far, and then you're getting the player demoralized, and he just doesn't care after that,
Well,
right?
that
That's where you want to
100%.
ride the fine line, obviously.
100%. And that's why the communication is so important. That's why he should be called out on it. Because it's like, yeah, use that trigger if you have to, but the communication has to come with it. It can't just be silence in a benching,
Exactly,
right? And that
exactly.
should be the standard with everybody on the team, especially if they're a regular in the lineup and they don't normally get benched. You need to tell them like what they are doing currently that is not right.
Yeah.
And like you said, maybe he did, but maybe he wasn't specific enough. Like he wasn't specific enough with Coots. We know that, and that was the captain, right? Like he brought that up. That's a big deal to scratch a captain, especially a guy like Coots who's like a hockey genius to
Yeah,
some
and
degree. So he'll understand.
the finite details matter to him, right? Like those are the big parts of his game are those little
He's a
details. So,
he in himself is most likely a future coach, in my opinion. I
oh,
think I
I
think
can see it.
Sean Couturier is like a future coach. He is that smart at hockey that he could coach. So I think, the attention to detail matters. He
Yeah.
talks about it too, right? From shift to shift. That goes for him too. So
And
and that's
just
top down.
just
Go ahead,
one
I'm
thing to
sorry.
end off with York, right? Like we have to remember only 24 years old. Like I know Tortorella obviously saw a really great season from him last year. But I think as the team just needs to be wary that, it's not going to always be linear. And I think that's kind of the reason why he's pushing this button, probably to get
Yeah.
more out of him. But you just have to understand, like, especially if he's hurt too, or like the shoulders bothering him, it's maybe, especially with the way the team's playing, like it's hard to expect so much out of the guy, right? So I
Yeah.
think there's got to be
But
a bit of a fine line.
that is a good point, but I wanted and it's very realistic and it's very much the reality. But that's like kind of the thing we were talking about Mitchkov when we were talking about his struggles. It's like, but as you become more of a pro every year, right? York is only 24. He's very young, especially for a defenseman. As you develop, you need to be able to bring it every night, whether you're losing, whether you're injured or whatever, dealing with an injury, you need to find a way to battle through because that is the NHL, that is the playoffs, which is the tone of the NHL playoffs, right? Like guys play hurt
Oh,
all through the play,
1000%.
right? So it's like,
1000%.
and there's extra motivation obviously in the playoffs, but it's a different scenario. But it's kind of like learning to be a professional and just always showing up. And again, I'm not knocking York here. I'm just talking about in generalities because I think York is awesome. Um, Look,
Same.
I don't think the Flyers are looking to trade Cam York. He is up for a contract. I don't think this conversation leads to a trade or something like that. If he gets traded, it has nothing to do with this conversation. It has to do with the fact that there's a piece out there that they really want, and
And
he's
covet, yeah.
yeah, and he's the asset that's asked in return. So, um, Because I think there are like probably 32 teams out there, or not 32, obviously, 31 teams out there that would love to have Cam York in their lineup. Okay, the other guy I want to talk about, and this, I would say he's in Tortorella's doghouse, but I don't really know what to make of it. So over the past 5 games, um, Jacob Peltier has played 10 minutes against Calgary. He played 750 against Winnipeg, 920 against Seattle, 832 against New Jersey, and 628 against Ottawa, even though he had an assist and he was a +1. Um, Not using him very much. And he, again, I guess he kind of falls in the Lixell camp as well. And he doesn't know the player that well, right? The guy's just come to join the team. I don't think the team is making a final decision on Jacob Peltier based off of this sample size. He was a young player. They brought him in to most likely develop him over the next couple of years. He's probably getting re-signed. But the one thing I did hear that was interesting is that they were talking about potentially using Peltier at center and that he was taking some draws, and that's something that he's trying to learn. That is a position where if you can get a guy like Peltier, who is somewhat undersized for a center though as well, if he could play some center, I think would be beneficial for the team. So it seems like the Flyers really don't know what to do with Jacob Peltier. We did bring up the center thing just because he played some center in juniors,
Yeah.
hasn't done it at the pro level though.
I
He
mean,
just seems to not really have a place right now. He's playing on the off wing.
yeah, it's weird that they don't seem to be able to find a role for him, just considering all the missing pieces in the lineup and like Nick Delorier's playing. I would just play him over a guy like that, obviously, right? And I mean, they're giving him more minutes than a Delorier, but I just think for Peltier at this point, why not try him at center, right? Like, what do you have to lose as a team? If he plays well, that's a plus for you, and it could be something that you use down the line in your roster, like if you do resign him, obviously. If it doesn't work out at center, then you just put him back at the wing and see where you go from there, right? Like there's really not any risk, especially based on where you are in the standings. If anything, and you end up losing games, it might be better for you. And might help your draft position. So I would just say realistically for Pelche, I'm interested to see it. Their center depth is really thin right now. Like if you look at the center position that they're rolling out, like with the Couturier, Cates, Paling, and Abels, it's like that's ultimately a third line center in Cates, two fourth line centers in Paling and Abels, and then maybe like a second, third line center in Couturier at this point in his career. So realistically, right, like if you're gonna try Peltier, why not?
Yeah.
I don't think you have better options at this point. So why not try him out, see what happens? If it works, then you might have a bottom six center to use in the future, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, look, I'm just trying to understand what they're trying to do with him in general. I feel like if you're going to test him at center, probably better to do it at the AHL level. But
but
they're just
maybe
not.
for his development, yeah.
Yeah, but they're just not really playing him either, which I think is a little surprising. Maybe that'll change as Torts gets to know him better. But you would think with the resume that he came in with, he was playing more in Calgary.
Point a game basically at the AHL level. They try to get him into some more offensive situations here,
Right.
but
And that's why I was surprised they still kept him at the fourth line and didn't and moved Lixell to the third line. Like these kind of surprised me a little bit. But he
maybe they
know
feel like Sal deserves like a bit of a longer look in a top nine role just because they really haven't given him a chance in that role for an extended period of time, and he's been a homegrown guy, so it's
true.
possible,
I,
right?
I also think it's that Torts knows Lixell, right?
Yeah, that as well.
And he doesn't really know Peltier as well as he does Lixell. And um, we'll see how that changes as things move forward. But it's a little weird for me.
I feel might as
Um,
well flip them. Like if you see Lixell not really producing so well, put Pelche there and vice versa, right? Like
yeah,
whoever's playing better can get that third line role, right? Have it be like an internal competition almost thing.
yeah,
So
yeah. And again, Peltier is a little bit younger. I think he's a year younger than Lixell. So we'll see how he gets used going into next season. I don't know if he's going to get some kind of long. There's a there's it's possible the Flyers move on from him too. But I think they traded for him to see if they can develop something out of him, and at the very least, like he'll be an AHL star for them the way Lixell is. So, we'll see what happens with Jacob Peltier. But so far, not being used too much. So. Okay, just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications to get notified when we release these episodes. And for the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a rating and a follow there as well. That is the best way to support this show. So if you made it this far and you haven't done that so far, please do that now. So yeah, not the longest of episodes. So we're already getting to the second half of the episode. This one's gonna be more focused on young guys. The first one I wanted to focus on was Nikita Gabrenkin. As of right now, he has not even joined the Phantoms. I believe he's stuck with some visa issues as well, as we saw.
Typical with players come from Canada to playing with a US team. You need an American work visa to
Yeah.
actually get to the States, right?
Yeah.
So
So it's unfortunate because I think we all want to at least see what he can do at the minor league level. The thought was that he's going to be spending time in the minors. He would be the youngest player on the Flyers outside of Michkov if he were to get called up. His role probably best suited for a fourth line role out, above a guy like Peltier or Lixell, or even a guy like Delorier. They do only have one call up left this season. So if they do make another call up, it'll probably have to be done on an emergency basis. It does kind of get into our next topic, but we'll leave that for a little bit here. But Nikita Gabrankin, do we think he's going to get a call up? At some point during the season, I don't know because they might have to use that call up on somebody else. But it seems like the Flyers really want to take a look at him in the minors. But I'm excited. I'm very intrigued with this guy because I see a role for him in the roster today. Like I would be happy to see him even fourth line minutes, which wouldn't be best for his development. But I would like to even see what he could do with the NHL today, playing alongside like a Hathaway on his line with Paling in the middle, right? Which we're not really set up for that at the moment. But he does seem like a kind of guy who could probably play in the NHL today, but probably best suited to play a top six role for the Phantoms for a little bit to get him kind of used to our system and get him scoring over here, get him transitioned over, not throw too much at him because he's just 21 years old. So, but what are your thoughts on Gabrenkin?
yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go with him. I feel like they probably want to keep him at the AHL level just to integrate him more for the playoff run. Because the Phantoms look like they will be making the playoffs, hopefully potentially going on a deeper run, and he can kind of be a part of that. Though, I mean, if there's injuries, right, and he gets all the visa stuff sorted out, you never know, right? They might just call him up because the management staff themselves might want to see him and just give him a taste of the NHL and what he can bring to the table. So I just think with his size, it's intriguing. The fact that he is a winger, playmaking winger with size, it's something really that this organization is lacking, right? We have a lot of wingers, not a lot of wingers with size, mainly smaller size wingers under 6 foot. So I think for the Flyers trying to get bigger in certain areas like that where you are such a small team up front is probably a long-term goal for the front office, right? So he might be that first piece of that. And then I wouldn't be surprised in the years coming here if we see them try to get bigger along the wing at some point because they are pretty small in that area. So
Yeah, and Jason Martinez had a good interview with Danny Briere, and he talked about that specifically. And shout out to Jason Martinez and wish him the best in his battle against colon cancer because I love that guy, and I hope
he's such an
he,
awesome guy, man.
yeah, I hope
Hopefully he
he's
can kick
okay.
his ass, kick
Yeah.
its ass and fuck cancer, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But definitely make sure to go check out the interview on the Flyers YouTube channel. Very good interview with Danny Briere, and they did talk about Gabrankin coming over in the trade. And Danny specifically said that they were looking, and we brought this up on the podcast again. Notice how many things we bring up on the podcast that Danny repeats like 3, 4 weeks later, that they were looking for players who could come into the NHL soon. And Gabrankin was high on their list from what Toronto had to offer. Probably, my guess, at top three of their prospects that they really wanted. And he was probably third on that list behind Minton and Cowan. And I know Branford, or I think it's Ben Branford. I forget his name. Branford, I think is his name, the defenseman. So he was probably in that mix of the top guys available. And this is a guy that Danny mentioned is close to NHL ready. He's got the size. They talked about how size was a big part of it. The Flyers are way too small. He talked about TK, Brink, and Mitchkov all being about 5'10", and now Peltier
That's
is also
generous, to be
five,
honest.
right. They're
Like,
all they're all 5'9", 5'10".
uh,
They're all smaller guys, and how they need to supplement that because they don't want to get rid of Brink and Mitchkov and TK to add size, right? Those guys are going to be here. So it's really about, finding bigger players. So now with Gabrankin, you know, it's a good piece in place that you could see even in the NHL, maybe even next year, because the Flyers kind of grabbed the guy that is going to be 21, going on 22 next year. Bigger size guy. You can play him on a fourth line role or even a third line role at the NHL level, depending on, his readiness for the NHL level. And then you still have, Tippett and Forrester who have size, but it is showing Flyers are going towards that problem, which it is a problem. The Flyers are one of the smallest teams in the league. So we'll see what happens with Gabrankin. You know, First let's see him at the AHL level, but hopefully he comes in hitting the ground running. Now,
yeah, my hope with him,
oh,
at least, especially at the AHL level, is just we see a guy that gets closer to a point a game. I believe he was kind of like at a point 0.6 range at the AHL level for Toronto. So if we can kind of see more of the offensive side, I think that's, I mean, the ideal, right? I think that's what they kind of want to see come out along with the size. So
and he's probably going to be a guy that Lappy likes. Let's be honest. Like he loves these grinding guys. He loves them. So if Gabrankin's resume is true, which I suspect it is, Lappy should probably work him in sooner rather than later. And he does have experience playing pro hockey for a while now, coming over from the KHL too. So good to see. So that kind of, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that kind of like segues into this. So the end of the OHL seasons, I don't know the exact date, but it's pretty much the last week of March or second to last week of March. It's going to be last year. It ended on the 24th. I'm not sure exactly what the end date of this season for the OHL. But Jet Luchenko is probably not making the playoffs. So will he join the team? If he joins the team, I don't think that counts as a call up. I think he would just join the Flyers, and that would still leave them with one call up. But that would probably help the Flyers lineup a little bit, where I would imagine Delorier would be sitting at that point. Luchenko would jump into the lineup. Paling would drop back to the fourth line, and then Luchenko would get in there on the third line behind Cates and Couturier. So um, I think we're all excited to see that. Again, he would still be able to only play a max of 5 games, so it wouldn't be even a long-term solution for within the season. But there'll be about, let's just say, about 15 games left, maybe probably less at that point. So you could play him in kind of every other game or something like that and bring him along and, rotate Delorier
yeah,
back in the
practice
lineup.
with the team and kind of get accustomed to the NHL schedule and lifestyle, to end the season and prepare him for the next season, right? So I think it would be smart. Just looking at it, the CHL season in general ends March 23rd.
23rd. Okay.
So
So about
it's
the
coming
same.
up. Yeah, it's coming up pretty close. So I think just in terms of Lachenko, we'll likely find out soon, right? We saw in the post deadline presser from Briere that he's not sure yet, but it's something that they're kind of interested in looking into. So I would imagine just how much they love Lachenko and how much Tortorella seemed to really enjoy watching Lachenko play and kind of his playing style and his speed. I would imagine they try to get him back here for some games. And, even if he can only play the 4 or 5 games without burning the ELC, I think just to have him around the team, around the, NHL level and kind of just being able to practice with the team even would probably be beneficial for Lachenko. He's still only a very, very young player. So I think any exposure around the NHL in general is probably a good thing for, a rookie essentially.
Yeah, and I don't know how it would work with the AHL. I do not know this for sure, but the fact that he's not even 19 yet makes me think that he's not eligible to play in the
I don't
AHL.
think they can loan him or do anything
Yeah,
like
I
that.
I
I'm not
think
100% sure, but I don't believe so being 18.
I think he can join the Flyers, and I think they should take advantage of it. Maybe they would want to let Luchenko just get into his off season, but I think he'd be better served playing with this team, to be honest with you, and at least getting to that 9 game max, where he can, get more experience, meet back up with the team, maybe help here at the end, and maybe gauge his NHL readiness after you let him go for a while and see what he's improved on. Even if he's not on the team next year, which I think there's a high likelihood that he is, I do think it's worth taking a look at him here at the end. But we'll see. So far, there's been no mention of it. Outside of that, Danny was asked about it, and he
Yeah.
said, he kind of left like no comment, but his answer was also kind of like, oh well, I don't want to, it depends on
It's almost like a wait and see
well,
situation, right?
he was being polite. He was talking about Guelph, battling for a playoff spot, and I don't think he wants to shoot that team down, right? So, I imagine Danny probably is interested to get him with this team, especially with how sparse they are right now and how
And at center, right?
right.
I just can't see how it hurts Lachenko really, or how it hurts the Flyers. So that's kind of why I look at it and I'm thinking, well, why not make it happen? Maybe they think that though, after such a long season and, being with the big club, then going back to Guelph, then going to the World Juniors, then going back to Guelph, having him come all the way back to Philly to kind of just for like a little stretch. Maybe that's too much for the kid in 1 year. Like I could totally understand that too. So we'll see. But I just think it wouldn't hurt to have him play a couple of games and, like you said, right, see what he might have improved on while with Guelph.
Yeah, and I think what really matters too is, like you were saying about the center depth, it's not like we would bring him in here to play 5 minutes, 6 minutes.
He'd probably be like the
Like
first line center, to be honest.
he would definitely be playing like 13, 14 minutes a night, right? Like Tortorella would already try to use him. Like Scott Lawton's gone now, so there's used him on the PK prior. So
Yeah,
like
ample opportunity. Yeah.
right, there is actual playing time available to him in this roster if he does come over here now. So you're not bringing him over here just to sit with the team. You're bringing him over here to put him with the lineup. So I think there's a pretty high likelihood of us seeing Luchenko again here at the end of the season, especially with the lack of line compatibility that we're dealing with, and at a certain point, the Flyers are mathematically going to be out of it. And at that point, there's going to be no risk in playing Luchenko because, at least in Tortorella's mind, right, there won't be any point to really winning games outside of just winning for morale. Um, I'm hoping we see Luchenko here at the end. I think it would be
Yeah,
a really nice way to end the season, to
I
be
think it'd
honest.
be cool. I think it'd be fun to see him and Mitchkov together as well to kind of end the season if they could do something like that. I think it would
Yeah.
be interesting. And I think for the fan base, at least, it kind of is
Yes.
almost giving a preview of, hey, don't forget, this is what's coming, right?
Right. No, 100%. Actually, that's exactly what I wanted to say. I think the fans are also demoralized, right? Like, we came in here, thought we could be a bubble playoff team like we were last year. Team underperformed in comparison to last year. We removed a bunch of guys from the lineup. People are excited about the draft, but in between that draft, it's going to get ugly here, because a lot of people are not following the team in the draft in that sense. They're just looking to see excitement on the ice, and at least having an 18-year-old that can fly like Connor McDavid up the ice, which he is that fast and that good of a skater. He's not Connor McDavid, but he is that fast and that capable that I think it would also help with an entertainment factor. And this is how I knew the Flyers weren't going into next year's lineup with what they were doing. I was like, from a pure entertainment factor, you cannot do it. And it's also why I don't think the Flyers are interested in finishing at the bottom of the league next year. I think they're interested in improving the team. This is a product. You cannot continue allowing it to tank. We've been at the bottom of the league. The Flyers are not in the conversation around the NHL. They're not in the conversation here around Philly. The only reason they are is because of Mitchkov. So they really, really need the entertainment
Yeah.
factor,
And
and Luchenko is that.
eventually that's gonna wear thin even with Mitchkov, right? Like going
Right.
into like people,
Exactly.
not to say it's gonna wear thin that like he's gonna keep playing well and he's gonna improve, but I just mean people are gonna expect that from him and it's not gonna become like, oh, look at this, right? So
Yeah.
they need to keep iterating and adding to the team. And I think like we kind of talked about, the whole trade deadline emergency episode. I think they've really positioned themselves in a good spot the next couple seasons to do that. So
Yeah. So there's another X factor outside of Luchenko, and that's Alex Bump. He finished his season. Most likely an ELC is around the corner. We don't know yet. We know Brent Flair talked about it, but this is another move to bring some excitement. I don't want to call him a poor man's, but let's just say he's a Gautier type of player. He's a shooter. He's a winger. He's got good size at 6'1". He already Flair said that he's an NHL player. He's a guy who the Flyers could bring into the lineup as well. And a guy that maybe could play with like a Travis Konechny, right? Maybe plays with Konechny and Luchenko, which would be, again, these are ways for entertainment factor. Or maybe Bump would go directly to AHL too. It's definitely possible also, especially because they are looking to make the playoffs as of right now, and they are in a playoff race, and they're in the playoffs as of right now. So Alex Bump's another big one. Again, he finished this season, and I had his stats open 2 seconds ago. Finished the season with 17 goals, 21 assists, 38 points in 34 games, a +6 rating, and only 10 penalty minutes. So he was by far the best player on his team this year. So he had the best stats. So it's not like there was another guy who's doing what he was doing with the team. And he's the youngest of the top players on his team. So he is a very good pickup for the Flyers from a draft standpoint as far as a prospect. So I'm excited to see if we get to see Bump here at the end of the season, even at the AHL level. I think a lot of people want to see him come over to the Flyers because he will definitely be top six guy at the AHL level. Maybe he's NHL ready. A lot of these NCAA
Well,
guys, when they've been cooking for a while, some of them can hop right into the NHL if they're good enough.
yeah, he's had two really good seasons with Western Michigan and the NCHC, right? Like last season in 2023-24, 36 points, 38 games. Like you said, Yariv, 38 points, 34 games this season, was nominated for the Hobey Baker. Obviously, there's a lot of people that are nominated, so he may
Yeah.
not win, but I mean, it's a great honor just to see that he's in that realm with some of these other guys. I think for the Flyers, like I would imagine they're going to sign to an ELC just based on how high they are on this kid and what we've heard from the organization, from AGM Brent Flair and even Danny Briere before the season began, right? Like they seem like they were already thinking of Bump as being almost NHL ready before the season started. So I would imagine now with another full season under his belt, being nominated for the Hobey Baker, they're probably thinking to themselves, okay, when do we finally get to see this kid at the NHL level? So I would imagine an ELC is coming. I don't know exactly if he will play with the Flyers this season, but looking at their roster and how depleted it is, it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. And even if he does, let's say, end the season with the Flyers, he'll still be able to join the Phantoms and potentially, go on a playoff run with them. So I don't see the risk in having him come to the Flyers. But I could understand them, opting to sign him to that ELC and just sending him to the Phantoms, just because if they do want to have a lengthy playoff run with that team and if they do want the Phantoms to have, long-term success in the playoffs coming up, it might be best to have him start with that team, get more familiarized, get the chemistry going with the Phantoms to hopefully add to their playoff chances, right? Versus just inserting him at the end of the NHL season, at the end of the AHL season for a playoff run with a bunch of players he really hasn't played with before at the AHL
Yeah.
level. So
Yeah. And also, I think it depends on if they have Luchenko with the team, right? If Luchenko's with the team, maybe they
less
don't.
less of a spot, right?
Right.
So
Maybe they don't opt to bring in Bump. If Luchenko's not with the team, maybe they do. I don't know. It's kind of up in the air, and I think it's something they need to figure out. But hopefully, we get some news about it over the next week or two. It'd
I
be,
think, yeah, those are two wild cards, right? Like, I think there's definitely a possibility you could see either one of Lachenko or Bump. Both would be tough unless there's injuries, but I think one for sure we will see. I'm not sure which one, but it'll be interesting for sure.
yeah, 100%. All right, we're kind of at the end of the show here, but I figure let's do our prospect readout thing here to end it since we haven't done that for
Yeah,
a while.
sure. I have before that too. I actually have a real random stat just to add in
Sure.
about the Flyers. Shout out Alex Appleyard on Twitter. He's always putting up amazing stats that we quote on the podcast. He's killing it. But Appleyard essentially stated for the Flyers this season, the top five in expected goals for percentage is as follows. So Emil Andre has the best expected goals for percentage of any Flyer this season with 58.94%. Obviously, it's a little bit of a deceiving number because he hasn't played many games with the team. So you
Sure.
have to account for that. Number two is Matvey Michkov with a 56.76 expected goals for percentage. That's not surprising. If you remove Andre, right, he's obviously number one. Number three on the list, which is a bit of a surprise, is Igor Zamula with a 56.15% expected goals for percentage. He does play against bottom pairings, and bottom of the lineup, so that could factor in. But that was an interesting one that he's on there. Cam York, 44.76%, fourth on the list, in expected goals for percentage this season. And to round out at number five, Sean Couturier with a 54.56 expected goals for percentage this season. That doesn't surprise me at all because usually when Couturier is on the ice, typically the Flyers have the puck just with the way he plays. So.
Yeah. Yeah, those are interesting stats. And Sanheim and York have some of the best analytics of any defensive pairing in the league, which is funny to think about from a right now bottom seven team in the NHL. So it's been a weird year. It's been a weird year. And Michkov
Definitely.
is kind of obvious. Also, with Andre, he did so well in that one stint that he came here. Those numbers were so high that
Exactly. That's why.
maybe now they're coming a little bit back down to earth. But with no Risto, it's going to be Zamula and
Well, it's
Andre
hilarious right
probably
now because
together.
I'm on Money Puck and I'm looking at the best expected goals for percentage for defensive pairings. And still, if you look at the top 25 defensive pairings in the league, the Flyers are in the top 25 with two pairings in terms of best expected goals for percentage, and you have at number 25 Andre and Ristolainen as a pairing with an expected goals for percentage of 56.8%. And at 18 you have Zamula and Ristolainen with an expected goals for percentage of 57.3%, and the constant there is Rasmus Ristolainen.
Yes,
So
who's had a
I
great season.
exactly right. He's
Yeah.
having a killer season, so it really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see how they use Risto next year because I don't think he's getting moved in the offseason. All right, let's do this prospect readout thing on elite prospects and we'll end off of that. I'll do the top, uh, I don't know, top 20, and then you can do the rest and the goalies. Sound good?
Yeah, that works. Let's do it.
All right, so we're just going by points order here. So Denver Barkey is not his season's not over yet, but in 49 games, and he did miss some time due to mono in the beginning of the season too. In 49 games, he's got 78 points for a 1.59 points per game, 23 goals, 55 assists, having an excellent season. Too bad we won't see him in the minors yet, but most likely next year. Jet Luchenko, 19 goals, 32 assists, 51 points in 40 games. He just had two assists the other night. 1.28 point per game. Ilya Paltov, still hovering at the 0.86 points per game. 50 games, he got 16 goals and 27 assists. Ule Excel in the minors had 41 points in 40 games, 17 goals, 24 assists, a 1.03 points per game. Cole Knuble still finishing a strong NCAA season, 12 goals, 27 assists, 39 points in 33 games, a 1.18 points per game. Alex Bump, we mentioned it earlier, 17 goals, 21 assists, 38 points in 34 games, a 1.12 points per game. So just show you how good Cole Knubel's season's been as well. Oliver Bonk, less points than he did have last season. He had 20 goals last year. This year, he's got 9 goals, 28 assists, 37 points in 49 games, .76. He's a plus 35 on a very dominant team. Jacob Gauthier still having a strong AHL season. 36 points in 57 games, 20 goals, 16 assists, a .63 points per game. I think he'll be here for a while as like a AHL mainstay. Spencer Gill, pretty good season two for his secondary season, a plus 30 on the year. He's got 35 points in 51 games, a .69 AO points per game. Very good for him. I'm interested to see. He's not going to be pulled over to the Flyers quickly, but second round pick. Interested to see how he develops next year. Might have a big offensive year next year. Samu Tuomala slowed down on his offensive production. He was hovering at near a point per game for the first half of the season. Now he's at .7, 32 points in 46 games, 11 goals, 21 assists. He's a -19, which is why he's not been called up this
Yeah, he's
year.
been struggling a bit.
5-on-5, he has been struggling. Anthony Richard is a point per game, 31 points in 31 games, 15 goals, 16 assists. We already know he's a great AHL player. Carter Sutherland, he's got 4 goals, 27 assists, 31 points in 61 games. Not as good as last year. Definitely better as the season progressed. He's only a -12 now. He was like a -20 at one point. So and still no contract for him, and I don't think it's coming. Heikki Rahonen having a good season in his first season in the USHL, 11 goals, 18 assists, 29 points in 39 games, 0.74 goals per game. Interested to see how he develops. He's going to NCAA next year. Rodrigo Abels with the Flyers right now. He has 27 points in 44 games, 12 goals, 15 assists, a
I
.61.
I will say about Abel's, Yariv, like I have actually really liked him like in a
Yeah,
fourth line role at the NHL level. He hasn't looked bad at
he
all.
plays a pro game.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
the guy is a veteran. I don't know about his long-term stay with the Flyers or anything, but
Yeah, he's
I
ready to play, exactly.
yeah. He's definitely a pro player. Like if he's not playing for the Flyers or the Phantoms, he's going to go probably back to Sweden or something like that. Owen McLaughlin, who does not have a contract, and I don't know if he's going to get one. 5 goals, 22 assists, 27 points in 35 games, .77 point per game. Jack Berglund, I think he's still recovering from the injury.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, he only played 4 games for his new team in the Allsvenskan League. He has no points in those games. We'll see if he's even healthy enough to play. He broke his foot during the juniors tournament. Wait, Zaid Wisdom, 25 points, 54 games, 9 goals, 16 assists, .46 point per game. Very good considering how terrible the first half of that 54 was. He had like no points. So much better second half. He's an RFA. I think he's going to get re-signed by the Flyers. Noah Powell, his OHL numbers have been much better than his NCAA numbers. He's got 19 points in 23 games, .83 points per game. He is playing top line at the OHL level for the Oshawa Generals as well right now. Uh, Alexis Gendron, 16 goals, 7 assists, 23 points in 51 games, a
It's pretty
.45.
impressive.
Yeah, pretty good considering he's a young guy in the same way that Luchenko is. So
Yeah, seventh round pick too, right? I just think for Gendron, what's been interesting is could score goals right at the QMJHL level. It looks like he's figuring out how to score at the AHL level. Like he might have a 20 goal season to end the season. So
yeah,
I'm just interested to see how he continues to progress because I think he's a guy where it's going to be like if he can score at the NHL level, he'll get a shot, right? So we'll
yeah.
have to see, but it's still a long ways to go and a lot of development. But it's really encouraging for a seventh round pick.
Yeah. It looks like potential third line goal scorer still for him. He's going to probably take another couple years in the
Yep.
minors. Alex Ciernik, having a down year, I would say. Expectations were higher. In 46 games, he has 23 points, 11 goals, 12 assists, .5. And we did talk about him with Steve, so we'll see what happens to him if he moves on to another league or maybe the Flyers bring him over to the AHL. I have no idea. All right, it's up to you, Vasili. Bring us home.
Yeah, let's do it. So Louis Belpedio, obviously still with the Phantoms. So 54 games this season, 5 goals, 18 assists for 23 points. He's kind of the veteran defensive presence for them, down there, him and Gleason, I believe. So that role will continue for Belpedio. Nikita Grabenkin, which we've talked about a ton on this show. 21 points in 39 games for the Marlies, 0.54 points per game. So I think we know that he's going to start with the Phantoms. We'll see if he can kind of raise those point of game numbers with more talk, maybe top six opportunity with the Phantoms and see if he can kind of get to that point of game range with the minor team. Oscar Eklund, 5 goals, 15 assists in 56 games this season for 20 points. So he's been having a decent season. And, he's kind of just similar to Belpedio, right, was brought in to kind of be like that veteran type of presence for the AHL team. Helge Grans has been having a good season, 7 goals, 12 assists, 19 points in 53 games. That's a 0.36 point per game average. Jacob Pelche is obviously with the Flyers now, but did have 19 points in 20 games for the Calgary Wranglers in the AHL. Kind of like what we alluded to, right? He's been typically a point a game guy at the AHL level. Ethan Sampson's been having a good season for the role that he's playing for the Phantoms. 17 points in 55 games, 7 goals. So he's continued to progress a bit, and we're seeing more of the offensive side of his game come out this season. Austin Moline in the USHL this season has 1 goal and 16 assists for 17 points, and that's in 49 games. Massimo Rizzo, who was dealing with a lot of injuries to begin the year, but has looked pretty decent for the Phantoms once he's returned in 37 games. He's got 16 points, and that's 6 goals and 10 assists. Emil Andre is now up with the Flyers, so we'll see how he does with the big club here. But for the Phantoms this season, he had 16 points in 25 games. Hunter McDonald still with the Phantoms, and I think they're looking to see how his physicality, might impact the team in the playoffs in that playoff setting. But in 57 games so far this season, he's got 3 goals, 13 assists for 16 points. Devin Kaplan, in 32 games for Boston University, he's got 10 goals, 5 assists for 15 points. I'm not sure if a contract's on the horizon just yet, but it could be possible. Rhett Gardner has also been with the Phantoms this season. In 50 games, he's got 5 goals and 10 assists for 15 points. Next up is Ben Gleason, also a defenseman for the Phantoms here. For the Phantoms this season, he has 11 points in 22 games. He did, as a total, he has 15 points in 29 games. So, pretty decent season for Gleason so far. Mateo Mann is with the QMJHL St. John Sea Dogs. 14 points in 52 games for him. 6 goals and 8 assists. He's more of a defensive defenseman anyhow, so it's all about the physicality, but a long-term type of project for a guy with his size. John Randall Avon with 13 points in 15 games or 50 games for the Phantoms. I know he did get hurt at a certain point. I'm not sure if he came back though, so I don't know if you're aware
He
of that,
he is
Yariv.
back. He is back. Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's at least, the injury is over for Avon and hopefully can end the season strong here. The Flyers have always liked his speed, so it'll be
I
interesting to
thought he
see.
was gonna have a better season.
I thought so too. I think the injury definitely didn't help, right? So
Sure.
hopefully he can get back on track here to end off and for the playoff run for them. Brian Zanetti with the SCL Tigers over in the Swiss League, 13 points, 52 games. Elliot Desnoyers, another disappointing season for him. Only 12 points in 47 games after having, a 20-goal year in his rookie season in the AHL. Adam Yinning also having a bit of a disappointing season. I think the Flyers were expecting a bit more from him at the AHL level. Only 12 points in 56 games. Santeri Solku with the Mestis. He's been injured essentially all year.
Yeah.
He's got 9 points in 7 games.
Which is
So
actually great, but
yeah, we just haven't been able to see him, in terms of the consistency over like a long stretch of games. So hopefully next season after this one kind of being injury riddled, he can get healthy and stay healthy. Um, and then just to finish off here with the final three. So Ty Murchison with Arizona State University has 4 assists in 34 games. I do not expect the Flyers will be signing him.
yeah.
Ryan McPherson is with University of New Hampshire, 2 points in 18 games. Not, great for him as an NCAA debut this season. And then Giovanni Smith is the recent acquisition from Colorado in the Eric Johnson swap. In the AHL this season for the Eagles in 6 games, he had 1 assist. He's not yet played for the Phantoms.
He was a second round pick. I don't understand this guy. He's never produced. Only the OHL level for like one season.
Yeah, seems like it was maybe teams targeting the physicality, and then it never
Yeah.
really ended up being much else. All right, so just to finish off, we'll go into the goalies here. So, Igor Zavragin's the cream of the crop, obviously. So far this season, in a total 39 games, split between Sochi and Scott St. Petersburg, he has a 915 save percentage and a 260 goals against average with a win-loss record of 913 and 0 and 3 shutouts. So for a guy who is a rookie, essentially, at the KHL level, really, really impressive numbers. Matej Tomek, who's in the Czech league right now, in 25 games with HC Litvinov, he's got a 915 save percentage and 2.47 goals against average. Carson Bjarnason with the Wheat Kings has had a pretty good season. For the Wheat Kings, he has a 2.98 goals against average in 36 games and a 912 save percentage as well. And he's 19, 14, and 3 on the season and has 1 shutout. And then now we'll get to the Phantoms goaltenders here. It's not that pretty. You have Cal Peterson in 26 games with a 3.28 goals against average and an 880 save percentage. He's 11, 12, and 3 on the season. You have Itu Makiniemi, who I believe is hurt at the moment. In 5 games played, he has a 3.03 goals against average and an 8.899 save percentage, and he was 3-0-2 this season. And Alexei Kolosov, who's now just been recently sent down to the Phantoms, and a guy who really does need playing time there and needs to get his reps in. In 8 games played so far for the Phantoms this season, he has a 3.39 goals against average and a 0.878 save percentage, and he's 3-4-1 with the Phantoms.
Yes, he does. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Kolosov does here at the home stretch, and hopefully he stays with the Phantoms for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I
Honestly,
think he's a very talented goalie. And I mean, for the Phantoms, right? We know how playoff runs can go. If he can get hot and maybe provide them some stability back there, maybe it can help them go on a bit of a run. That'd be, I think, the ideal situation for everybody, right?
yeah, 100%. All right, that's it for us. Again, a slower show. That's why we ended with the prospects. Anything you want to leave our audience with, Vasili?
No, just want to thank everybody for supporting the website over the trade deadline. When these events like a trade deadline or a draft and things like that come up, usually we get a ton of traffic. So just want to say thanks to everybody for supporting flyers2degree.com and for checking out our content in terms of the podcasts for the trade deadline. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to close off, just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications. Get notified when we release these episodes. For the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a rating and a following if you can. That is the best way to support this podcast. If you have made it this far, please do that now. And also shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. To Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. They will help facilitate the process between you and your insurance company and make sure you get the best claim possible. And also shout out to sportspider.com. They are our partners. They are an aggregator of sports content from all over the internet. Make sure to check them out. Our stuff is pinned at the top, and their link is in the description of this video and the audio as well. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We love you guys. And remember, always stay